Welcome, 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 everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It won't just be me in this Instagram Live. In a second, I'm going to be joined by the fabulous Amy Coutts from Acting with Courage, and we're going to be talking all about how an actor can begin to free. And Amy will be joining us just in a little second. Welcome, welcome, everyone, if you're joining us. Hello, hello, hello. And here's Amy. Hi, Amy.
Hi. Hello.
How
Can
are
you hear
you?
me okay there?
Can hear you, can see you. Can you hear and see me?
Perfect. Yes.
Always best to check these things before we dive in.
It really.
Um, Fantastic. And Amy, I'm just going to introduce yourself to these guys for a little minute, just so they know exactly who you are, and then we'll jump right into chatting. But if you don't know Amy already, what are you doing? You should follow her, people, and follow her accounts. What's going on? Amy is a fantastic actor, narrator, writer, and producer in her own right, who has 16 years of experience across theatre, film, voiceover work, commercials, you name it. She's done it. And she trained in rapid transformational therapy, RTT, a little later on in her acting career in order to overcome some negative experiences she was having and blocks she was having within her acting work, I believe. And since then, and since she's had that experience, she's sort of dedicated a part of her life as well to helping others overcome these problems and issues and fears they might be experiencing. And her mission is to help as many people as possible find courage within themselves, remove blocks, and fulfill their dreams. So, Amy, that's a little bit about you. And thank you so much for joining us tonight on An Actor's Guide to Freeing Yourself from Fear.
Thank you. That was quite an introduction. So I appreciate that. I was like, oh wow, I sound so good.
So I was trying to cover all the bases when I was researching you. I was like, oh, I need to add that and add that and add this. So yeah, no, but yeah, you've done a fair few things. So once I was diving in, but so Amy, I think this is a hugely prevalent conversation to be having right now. It always is, but especially now that we're in these really uncertain times. People might be feeling anxious about a number of different things. Obviously, the industry is looking very different to what it did sort of a year ago. Things have completely changed. So I think it's hugely relevant that we have this chat just now. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking a lot of the time with fears, they quite often come to nothing in reality, right? Like quite often we get filled with all sorts of fear and anxiety that doesn't actually happen in real life. And yet it's so easy to be overtaken by it and to have it control us in some way. So I guess just to kick off this conversation, I mean, I have a bit of a roadmap for a conversation. Feel free to take it in any direction you want.
Sure.
But what are some common fears that you see? And we're being joined by quite a few people just now. Maybe if they want to put in the chat as well, some common fears that they've been experiencing, common anxieties in their acting as well. So yeah, if you want to give us a little window into that.
Sure. Just to kind of go back a second, I see that you named this "Freeing Yourself from Fear," which I think is a really cool title, and I'm a big fan of alliteration, and hence why it's kind of part of my little mission statement. But I kind of want to clarify it a little bit. So obviously we are wired to have an element of fear for survival, right? It's quite a primitive thing. So, we have to have an element of fear that stops us just from walking out into the middle of traffic, or that stops us from walking up to, I don't know, a tiger, or sticking a knife in an electric socket or something like that. So we have, fear is necessary. But with me, I guess what I want to try and do for other people, or help them to be able to do more so, and what I've tried to do for myself, is to not let fear paralyze me. I often think of it also as like chains pulling me back. So fear can often stop us from putting ourselves out there. So it's being able to free yourself from being paralyzed or stopped or completely hindered by fear is sort of my mission. And I guess if I go from my own personal experiences, my biggest fears previously as an actor were around auditioning. So one of the reasons I tried to find something to help me get through that was that I would just, make a complete hash or a complete mess of auditions that I got for good roles, because I would get so worked up inside about how important it was to get the job, or if I mess up a line, or if I go in and you know, have I done enough? Have I done a good enough job, or am I going to be rejected? Am I going to look stupid? So it's sort of a lot of those fears that I think most actors would agree, or not getting the role, or actually conversely getting the role. So that feeling of like, oh God, if I don't get that job, you know, what are people going to think of me? Or am I really a real actor? And it's all this weird self-talk that goes on. And also, but then there is, weirdly enough, that fear of getting the job. Oh my God, I'm going to be so visible. Oh my God, imposter syndrome. Oh, am I really good enough? Maybe I'm faking it. It's all those things that often go on. I think a lot of actors would agree in their heads. You know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and it's this perceived threat that we have that I work with people to remove. And I had actually a client recently. It was that very thing of, she would get, you know, very talented young lady. It's obvious to me looking at her just how talented she is. But she would just get a self-tape request or an audition request in her inbox and then go, oh my God, and start freaking out. So, but not knowing why that was. Like, this is what I want. I want to be an actor. I want to get jobs. I want to be successful. But oh my God, suddenly all the doubt creeps in, like, oh, why do they want me? Or, oh my God, I've got to do this self-tape in less than, you know, 8 hours or something. So we build all these things up. And I think it's because we care so much a lot of the time about doing this thing that we love and getting these jobs and being successful and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff.
No, 100%. Just picking apart a few things. That's a fantastic window into some common fears that actors are experiencing. And it seems like we're on this never-ending cycle, right? Like, as you pointed out there, whether we have the job or don't have the job, we'll still be tricking ourselves in our heads to worrying and being anxious about a whole number of things because
Yeah.
we want to do it to the best of our ability. And when we first started to connect online, Amy, what I really, really enjoyed about our conversations was that you were coming at acting from a holistic approach. You weren't just looking at the technique and skill that is needed, and that is a huge, huge part of acting, but you understand that there's a person behind that actor, and quite often we get lost, I think, in the realm of, we're actors, we have to live up to an expectation
Yeah.
that, you know, if somebody says we have to do something, we have to jump through hoops to make it happen. And quite often we neglect that level of self-care and that level of looking after ourselves, basically, on a basic level. But also, from what I'm hearing you say there, is you went back to way in prehistory, right? Since the dawn of time, we've experienced fear in some way. So are we saying that this isn't something that can be eradicated completely and we can completely get rid of? Is it always going to be something that's on the periphery no matter what we do? Is that a fair way to look at it? Or
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I'm not an expert in fear, but I've done, you know, research and learned a lot of things around it. And recently, actually, I'm starting to learn a bit more about people who go into trauma states, which is, it can be flight, fight, or freeze response. And so with trauma, you can often go into a freeze response. So I'm learning a bit more about that kind of stuff as well, but also perceived threats or perceived fears that we have. I think I think it's okay to have, it's almost like knowing when fear is necessary and when it's not. Or we start to muddle, I think, things that are genuinely, you know, can cause a slight element of fear for our survival when we need it, as opposed to daily life, where we start fearing things or attaching a perceived threat, like, you know, could be something as simple as opening your inbox at work the next day and there's all these emails, and suddenly the anxiety rises. You go, oh, I've got all these, you know, all these things, this to-do list, and we start getting very anxious and panicky, and that's about disappointing other people. And this is something I learned actually from a really lovely doctor from my homeland of Australia, Dr. Libby, fabulous biochemist, and she talks about you know, this feeling of rushing around all the time is what we seem to do, and what we perceive as threat, we're perceiving it in the way we might perceive that tiger, right? That tiger in front of us who's hungry. But we kind of brought it into a modern context in which, you know, we are running on this sort of, I guess the way I used to think of it actually, when I realized that I had a lot of anxiety early on, in probably my early 20s, was like this feeling of an engine, like a car engine that's always whirring and never turned off. And that's not a great place to come from all the time. So it starts to affect your nervous system. It starts to affect your ability to think when you start getting panicky. But it's the meaning we attach. Am I afraid or am I excited? So is it adrenaline because I'm ready to do something, or is it really a scary situation? And I think trying to understand the difference between that, especially as actors, is really, really important. Yeah, I think having an element of fear is always going to exist, and we need it. But when is this a real threat, and when is it not? Right?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
having 100 emails in your inbox unopened, is that really a scary thing? Or is it not? Is it just something we have to go, well, what's important and what's not important? Trying to do everything at once is where all this anxiety, and trying to please other people all the time is where a lot of this anxiety comes in. Yeah.
No, 100%. And I think that's such a great point, is that this little tiny, I think it's like an almond sized sort of bit in the back of our brain, this amygdala, right? This is where all
Yeah.
these sort of things buzz from. And it's still relating it to, there's a saber-toothed tiger coming for us, or,
Yeah.
there's a big scary thing. And it's not. It's the end of the day. It's
Yeah.
an email from our agent or something like that that we're creating it to. It's so important to contextualize it, or be able to remove yourself from that immediate sort of physical feeling, right? Because it's a chemical thing, right? It's a physical overtaking of your whole body, really, when you get into this state, right?
Yeah.
Which is very hard to manage, I guess.
But it's very much to do with your self-talk as well. So, and this is what I was, when I was working with this client recently, I was saying, well, what would be the opposite of that? So it's trying to flip it from, oh my God, I just got an audition. Oh, I've got to do all these things. It's scary, to, oh my God, this is exciting. Oh, I'm excited. Oh my God. Like, oh, they want me to audition for this role. So it's about flipping your, what the feeling you might get, that butterfly feeling that we get, if we change the language around that. An example I'll give is that I started to, if I was just about to go on stage, and I did this last year, and I was doing a two-hander show for Brighton Fringe, and I was telling this other actress that this is how I think about nerves, right? I just say, oh, my electricity's been turned on. Oh, I feel my performance energy. So when you get that, rather than going, no, I'm not going to be nervous. No, I'm not nervous. Rather than trying to suppress the feeling, you feel it, because you don't want to go on stage in a hypnotic state. That's definitely not what I would encourage. You don't want to go on half
Mm.
asleep. You want to be alert, but
Mhm.
it's the language, the dialogue that you're telling yourself. Oh my God, I'm terrified to go out there and do this show. I'm going to forget my first line. You're setting yourself up automatically with that adrenaline that you're feeling, and that those butterflies. You're setting yourself up, to make mistakes. But I mean, it's hard to say that even in because you're working within the moment, so it's okay to kind of, but for want of a better word, you're setting yourself up not to give the best performance that you can, and not to be free, and not to access all the performance parts of yourself that you need. But if you reframe that and go, oh, I feel excited, I feel energized, somebody's turned on my electricity, I'm ready to do this, it's very, very different. I'll give you an
Yeah.
example of this actually. So rapid transformational therapy was developed by a woman named Marissa Peer, who is a British therapist. She's got talks galore all over, and she goes all over the world. She talks about Carly Simon and Bruce Springsteen. She gives this very famous example of the two of them. So I think Carly Simon, I believe, gave up performing because she couldn't handle it anymore. It was just too much. So she would talk about like how much it basically sort of paralyzed her, and she didn't want to do it anymore. Bruce Springsteen, on the other hand, he loves that moment before he walks out onto the stage. He thinks it's just the best thing, getting out there and performing and having all these people. He loves it. So it's two people, very talented. One perceives the energy that they're feeling as a, oh God, I can't do this. And the other one perceives it as a, yes, I'm ready, let's do this. And therein lies the difference and why one still performs and one doesn't. So, yeah.
So it's like to make this actionable for people. What we're saying here is that by having a cloak of negativity and having this negative self-talk going on, it's this self-fulfilling prophecy almost, right? That you're feeling, if you're feeling negative about something, if you're talking negatively to yourself, you're going to walk into a situation, feeling anxious. But simply by
Yeah,
flipping it and starting to look at it from a positive lens, that can make a huge difference. Is that the idea?
massively, massively.
Yeah.
It's about how you dialogue with yourself, and obviously when I work with clients, so the therapy that I offer is its basis is in hypnosis. So you're going into an alpha or a theta brain state where you are suggestible and you are highly relaxed and you are able to accept better thoughts and better suggestions. And anyone who might be watching might have downloaded a self-hypnosis recording before and had that sort of, for whether it be weight loss or smoking or whatever it might be. But yeah, but even when you're not in a hypnotic state, you can do little things each day to sort of flip the language that might be coming into your brain, that the dialogue that you might be having with yourself, because it might even be good to write down. And again, if I use the same client again, is we were working together and she said to me, oh, I still kind of get little thoughts that creep in. I said, okay, that's fine. Don't try to ignore them or beat yourself up or push them away. Why don't you start writing them down? Why don't you make a note of them? The thought that comes up, make a note. And what's the opposite of that? You can even write down the opposite of that. So that's a simple exercise that you could do
Mm.
to start flipping it. And like anything, it's about repetition and habits. And so if you get into the habit of that, then you'll find that you won't need to so much actively do that. It will just you'll start to hear yourself saying, oh, yeah, I can do this. Or I'm nervous and I can't go out there, to I'm excited and I'm looking forward to going out and doing the thing that I love. So just
That's
simple things.
fantastic.
Yeah.
That is excellent. It's just so amazing to hear just how simple the flip can be, right? Like as human beings, we can just make things so complicated for ourselves, right? And the
Exactly. Yeah.
simple keys in can make such a big difference. We've just had a few comments here. Amy, I was just going to check through.
Sure.
Pinata Alyssa, I hope I said that right. I definitely didn't. But it's saying, hi, what's up? Follow you guys because I like acting. You guys are really cool. Well,
Oh,
thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for saying that. And Akila has joined us as well. Hello, Akila. Nice to see you. And just be dropping in the comments, guys, if you have any questions, any comments as we go through. There's so much I want to dive in with you, Amy. This is an amazing time. I'm thoroughly enjoying myself. But I guess, like, one thing you touched on there, you touched on about hypnosis, right? And
yeah.
I think possibly, right, some people's perceptions of hypnosis, because they've maybe been exposed to it from an entertainment sort of value, it's maybe
Yes.
tricking people into eating an onion and pretending it's an apple or some crazy stuff like that, right? And it maybe gets a bit of a bad rap. But like from my understanding, and please tell me if I'm wrong, along the right lines or completely off here, it's getting yourself into a state of relaxation, like a bit like when we're sleeping, we can form new patterns and sort of new connections in the brain and things like that. And from my understanding, it's a bit like that, right? That you're getting yourself into a relaxed state, that you're able to get into new waves, new patterns of thinking, be open to new ideas and stuff. But yeah, fill me in. Like, what is
Yeah,
the?
yeah, you're on the right track. And yes, so often, I do get people asking me, oh, thank you, Jared. He says he loves this conversation. Great,
Thanks,
good to know.
Jazz.
Um, yeah, I often get questions like, are you going to make me cluck like a chicken? Are you going to pull out all my secrets? And I mean, it also doesn't help when, Jordan Peele writes a movie called Get Out, if anyone's seen that.
Of
Great
course,
film.
yeah, of course.
But I thought this really doesn't help my cause.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, look, I guess the simplest kind of ways to explain this, and I guess perhaps people might latch onto, is you're not asleep, right? You're not fully asleep. It's that kind of, it's about your brain waves, right? So we've got beta, we've got alpha, theta, we've got delta. They've done a bit more they're doing a bit more research about gamma. That's a whole other thing, but there's not enough known about that brainwave, right? So Beta is where we are right now. And just remember, during the day, we actually slip in and out of different brain waves, right? So you're constantly moving through the brain waves. Probably the one you're not going to until you're actually in your bed is delta, which is when you're asleep. But we shift in and out of beta, alpha, and theta quite regularly. So beta is where we're at right now. So you and I are talking, we're processing, there's a lot of stimulus, we're thinking, we're forming, you know, we're awake, we're conscious, right? And then alpha and theta are slower brain waves. So alpha kind of is a little bit slower than beta. That's good for us as actors and performers because it's where, you know, there's creativity, you know, like you kind of flow, there's enhanced problem solving, there's less fear, stress, tension, anxiety. Beta is good, but a high beta state is where we can get quite anxious if we are constantly alert and stimulated. And I think sometimes too, our use of our devices, constantly being connected with the internet, kind of keeps our brain constantly like processing all this information in one day. Or many minutes or seconds of the day, you're processing so much information because we're constantly scrolling and looking at videos and processing and all this stuff. So we need to have times when we kind of disconnect from that because, you know, we need those times to sit and be bored. You know, like boredom is good. When you let your mind drift off into a daydream, that's where ideas can come from. I don't know if you've ever been, maybe you're in the shower and you're just relaxing and you realize the answer to the problem you've had all day. When you've been trying to force your brain to come up with a solution, you're so relaxed because you've kind of slipped into like a trance, which is basically what hypnosis is. It's an induced trance. And suddenly you're like, oh, I know the answer. Or you're like, oh, what's the name of that? What's the name of that? Oh, and you're trying so hard. And then when you're not thinking about it, it pops into your brain. So that's when, you know, we're activating and accessing those slower brain waves. And we have to slow down sometimes to be able to come up with creative ideas and all that sort of stuff. Theta is even slower. And that's more to do with rapid eye movement, which is similar to REM. And so again, like, you know, your problem solving, that's where we can reprogram your brain to think differently. That's where the suggestion can come in, right? When you're more relaxed. And also too, as actors, and I've thought about this a lot, is when you are in a relaxed state. And actually, Adam, when I interviewed you for my YouTube series, you mentioned this, and this was a great point that I wanted to bring up today, is that you recommend to people, and by the way, I'm going to release that interview very soon, everybody. So watch this space. There's an interview between Adam and I already that will be on YouTube. But one of the things you said was that you listened or you read your lines just before you were going to bed. So as you were winding down, as you were starting to relax, you read over your lines and then read them again in the morning, and then you found you remembered them because you've allowed your brain to slow down and to be open to receiving that information. You're not distracted, you're focusing. So you can have a lot more focus and intention when you're in those slower brain waves. And so when I work with clients, I don't do the you're getting sleepy club, but I do what's called, there are inductions, and this goes back as far as psychotherapists such as Milton Erickson, even Sigmund Freud, I believe, was an advocate of hypnotherapy or hypnosis as a therapy technique for people as well. So basically, you know, it's we want to be slipping in and out of that as creative people. Because it is where we can get great ideas to write things. It is where we can, you know, also do healing, which is what I do help a lot of people to do, is to, you know, it's like if I was upgrading my operating system on my phone, right? So, you know, a lot of us are walking around with an operating system that could be 20 years old and not really realizing it and not really knowing, why do I do that? Why do I self-sabotage all the time? Which was a big thing for me. So for a long time, I was self-sabotaging. I was sabotaging auditions, in social situations. I'd suddenly get this feeling that I shouldn't be there anymore. And I'd feel alienated and weirdly inferior to other people. And I couldn't explain why. And you try to rationalize it and use your logical brain. But actually, you know, 90% of our thoughts and beliefs and feelings are if you think of an iceberg, 10% is the conscious mind and about 90% is the subconscious. So much happens subconsciously, and so much of our programming happens, you know, even sometimes before the age of 7, because we're little sponges. We're taking all of it. And children, quite often, you know, I don't know if your teacher ever said to you, Adam, stop daydreaming, stop staring out the window, or you're like, you're bored, or you're staring and you've switched off, or you're not listening. Because kids go in and out of those states quite often, like alpha and theta. They spend a lot of time there, you know, and using the imagination. And that's, the imagination is something that we kind of, a little bit as we start to get older, because you're, you know, you're becoming an adult and all that sort of stuff. So, oh, I think you froze, Adam. Oh no.
Oh no, I think you maybe froze a little bit, but hey, we'll catch up. It's all right. No, I'm still hearing you loud and clear through it. But that is amazing, because yeah, one of the questions I had, that was such an amazing comprehensive breakdown of that. Thank you so much. Like,
All right.
I had a little sort of meander here, and I'll just catch up on comments real quick, Amy, whilst we've come to a stop.
Sure.
Noreen has joined us. Oh my goodness. Hi, Noreen. Lovely to see you once again. This is so interesting, says Noreen. Hope you guys do a pre-recorded Zoomcast and get Jared involved. And a really smart tip about remembering lines and slowing the brainwaves down. Thanks, Noreen. Thank you very much. So this was my thing. Like, so there might be some cynics out there, right? There might be some people that's like, all this stuff that Amy is saying is all well and good in theory, and I understand it intellectually, but actually, when I'm experiencing those things, it's very, very difficult just to get myself out of that state or whatever. And I think what you just illustrated there and what you were proving as you went through it step by step by step, that this goes beyond just like things that you're in control of. This is things that will overtake your whole body, right? That this is a really strong physical reaction when it comes to things like anxiety, when it comes to things like fear, is going to completely take control of you. And almost once you've hit the state of fear and anxiety, it's like there's no coming back in a way, right? You're there, and it's about more of this preventative measures that you can take place about trying to change the chemicals that are running through your brain, trying to calm yourself down. Like when people say to breathe, and you know, people are like, I am breathing. I'm already breathing. but no, there's actual breaths you can do to actually slow yourself down, to change your sort of ways, absolutely, your states of thinking.
Yeah, and there's 2 things I want to comment on there. So just to make it clear, I mean, yeah, you're right. There are people who may be like, hogwash, this is not for me. Totally fine. I totally accept that. And people are going to come to, whether it be healing or improving performance in their own ways. And I, you know, I'm open to lots of different things. And one of my clients once said to me, why hypnosis? I thought that's an excellent question. I said, you know what? Because that's the thing that finally worked. When I was having all the issues, you know, that I was having with, it was an underlying health issue that I had as well. I said, that was the thing that unlocked it for me. Maybe if it hadn't worked, I would have kept looking and going for something else. But that was the thing that worked. And I've seen it work for people, and I've seen it change their lives. And that's why I do the work that I do, because I know me personally, it had a profound effect on my life, and it changed my life in so many ways, to the point where the fact that we're even having this conversation now is also evidence of that. Because, you know, I wasn't a great networker, and I didn't put myself out there, and I felt very threatened by other people. And I can say that right now without shame, but for a long time, I probably kept that in and thought, oh, how dare you be like that, you know? But the truth was, I felt very threatened. And you're right, there was a lot of comparison going on with me and other actors, and other people were getting jobs I wasn't getting. And you start to look at yourself and go, what's wrong with me, and what am I doing wrong? And, you know, I get these audition opportunities, and then, you know, would go in there and just get so worked up about how important and how it was like life and death to get this job, that it would just shut me down, and I wasn't free. But another thing I want to say is that, so the method that I do, RTT, is that, and not all hypnotherapy does this. Different technique, there's different types, and people do different things. So some hypnosis is just purely getting someone into a trance, slowing those brainwaves down, and doing what's called pure suggestion, right? So that's when I say to you, Adam, you are enough, you are talented, you know, you can nail your auditions, whatever it might be that you need to hear, right? You are unique. you walk into the audition, and visualization comes into this as well.
Mm.
You see yourself walking into the audition room. You see yourself preparing. You know, you've got all your preparation, your lines, they're so deeply embedded in your brain. So that's suggestion. So I could give you that as a recording, right? But
Mm.
when you actually do a full session, you do what's called looking for the root cause. So this was what I needed. So for the last 5 years, I've been a meditator. So I meditate twice a day, 20 minutes a day. And meditation is phenomenal. And often people are like, well, what's the difference and what's the similarities? Well, there's a lot of similarities because people, you get into a relaxed state in your mind and body. Meditation, though, does not really have an outcome or an intent that you're going for necessarily. You can have a mantra when you meditate, and there's all kinds of different sorts of meditations. But really it's about being in the present, and it's about just observing your thoughts and just breathing, and it's a solo activity most of the time that you'll do by yourself. But the difference is with hypnosis is you are usually going for an intent or an outcome, whether it might be weight loss, public speaking. I want to be a confident speaker, or confidence, or, you know, did I say smoking or weight loss? I might have said that, both of them. I always forget. Or overcoming a fear of something. So I've worked with people that have had fears and phobias, or imposter syndrome. So that's the difference. And in order to understand, you know, how I got the self-sabotage, I had to know where in my life this came up. And so that's when we do root cause. And so we go back and we try and look for moments and memories in that person's life that have caused them to develop this issue. And we want to interrupt those thought patterns. We want to rewire their thinking, and we want to remove their attachment, right? So we want to change their beliefs and reframe the way that they view those situations, and realize that actually, you know, you're not 10 years old anymore at school with, you know, people not wanting to hang out with you in the playground. That's a personal memory of mine. You're a grown woman now, and you've got lots of friends and family and people who love you. And so, you know, you could tell me that till I'm blue in the face just by telling me, right? But I may still have my inner critic going, and there's nothing wrong with talking about it, because for some people, you just telling them, Adam, you've got this, you're going to be fine, that might be enough for you, right? You might go, yeah, Amy, cool, yeah, I believe that, I'm good. Maybe that isn't, those are the words and you hear them. But for some people, that inner critic can be so strong, and it's like, yeah, right, whatever, that can't be true because I've seen all this evidence of how it's not true. But when you go into someone's subconscious, and when they are in this lovely, relaxed state of hypnosis, you are more open to being suggestible. You are more, your subconscious mind is more willing to let that in, because you've shut down that really mean bully, that mean girl. That place between awake and asleep, and it's that lovely feeling of, I feel myself drifting off, but I'm still aware. I have an awareness, and I have a goal, a focused intention. Yeah.
Mm.
So
No,
that
that's
is,
wonderful.
I can't even remember.
Hey, as I say, I had a rough roadmap, but I was like, let's just see where we go with this
I
conversation.
can't
I'm
remember,
loving it. It's great.
sorry.
I mean, one thing that you did mention there, and it's something I often think about, and I'm like, I don't even know how far I want to go down that rabbit hole,
Sure.
is if we start to think like why we want to be performers, why we want to be actors and stuff,
Yeah.
it probably does go back to some kind of root cause from a very, very early stage in our life somewhere, right? Like, and
Maybe.
I love that
Yeah.
thought, like that you're saying it's about going back to the root of the issue a lot of the time when it comes to an anxiety or a fear, that the
Yeah.
fact that you feel the way you do, maybe about auditions, maybe about not being good enough, maybe about feeling anxiety about what other people's successes are around about you, are symptoms of maybe a greater root cause, like a greater sort of problem that's
Yep.
been allowed to sort of build and grow on its own. And that we all have this framework that we see the world through, this lens that we see the world through. And it's about changing that story a little bit that you're telling yourself. Is that?
Yeah, and actually, just to interrupt you there, Adam, Noreen has written something really interesting, actually, which I want to address, and I think it goes back to what you were saying about anxiety and fear. So she said, I believe that as a result of coronavirus, so many actors and artists will have negative thoughts on themselves due to not being able to get work, and over 500 actors applying for one job. Absolutely, Noreen. Yeah, 2021 will be the year that people will go and get hypnotized, maybe, to stop the negative story. Yeah, well, you know, not even just, yeah, Noreen, that's brilliant. And I agree with you. I guess it comes back to what we were saying about fear and anxiety. Like with anxiety, you can do, and the breathing we were talking about is, yes, there are techniques, and you know, people's, it's not to say that people's fears are not real, because they are. Their feelings and their fears, you know, there are real concerns out there right now, and I feel for everybody. And Nireen, you're right. You know, I'm seeing on a daily basis, looking on Twitter, people just writing posts that break my heart. And I sometimes, you know, I've never met these people. We might follow each other, or, you know, we've never met, or I've built a dialogue with them, but it breaks my heart. And I think that's why I also do this work, is because, you know, I was that bully to myself, and I was for such a long time, and it hurts. I take it very personally when I see people being, you know, so down on themselves, and there is a fear around, you know, what's going on with the arts. You know, I know in the UK, this is a very contentious point at the moment. And a lot of dialogue back and forth about, you know, what's going on with the efforts, you know, in this billion-dollar industry at the moment. It seems to be that the efforts feel like they're falling short. A lot of actors and performers are feeling like they're not being supported at the moment. And I hear that. And but I am also hopeful, you know, I'm hopeful that, and we kind of talked about this on our interview previously, is that I think the feelings that people are having right now just reinforces how much stronger we actually are going to be when we eventually can recover this industry. And people are going to want to write things. More people are going to be wanting to get out, even as viewers, to get out to live theatre. They will have had enough of their binging of TV, hopefully by that point. I know I definitely am at that point. Not that I've binged a lot, but, you know, there's times when you throw things on. And I think people are going to be craving live experiences. People are going to want the arts, you know, so much more. That's going to take shape. People are going to have creative ideas. You've even talked with me, Adam, about some creative ideas that you've got for 10 Feet Tall, which is very exciting. And so, you know, we are so adaptable, creative people. It's tough, but we will find a way. Like, I fully believe that. I am, as much as I feel the pain that people are going through, I feel hope too. And I think there's a lot that we can do to keep ourselves going in the meantime. But if anyone is feeling anxiety or things that come up, there's a lot of things you can do. So one thing you can do, I don't think you can see me very well, is you can actually, if you put your hands on your shoulders and you just apply some pressure and you stroke down your arms, that actually, do that 20 times, your breath starts to come down and it starts to slow down. Sticking your tongue to the roof of your mouth is another one as well. Closing your eyes and taking deep breaths. Grounding exercises. So again, you know, acknowledge your feet on the ground. Acknowledge 3 things that you can see around you, what you like about them. Just name and identify things, and it can bring you back from feeling that overwhelm and that anxiety. Just, you know, it can really, really help. Breathing is definitely one thing. Again, meditating, even if you feel like you don't want to dive into a full hypnosis session at this point, it's, you know, there's so many things you can do for yourself. You know, but yeah, you know, it's been nice over the summer. I've been able to support a few actors, you know, with sessions, and also with, you know, hypnosis recordings and things, to help them with self-tape challenges. I've had a few people say, oh my God, Amy, I've signed up to this 21-day self-tape challenge. I've got a terrible memory. No problem. Let's do a memory recording for you. And yeah, and reducing that sort of fear around and turning it into excitement. And yeah, I think I got off topic a bit, so sorry.
No, hey, no, it's all fantastic, actionable stuff in there, 100%. I'm just tracking back on one question we haven't touched upon yet from Jared, the Actors Approach Craft Toolbox. He says, I understand the focus to be able to move past negative feelings and fear so you can function like as a person. Whatever the character requires to have fear, have you been asked to help someone to create the fear from a character point of view? And I guess to add on to that question, like, do you find like that by having this explicit sort of idea about yourself and your feelings and what you experience of the world, do you feel that like that can add to your acting, that can add to your performing because you've got a greater awareness of who you are? Like, is that something? Is that a thing?
So, sorry, that's a great question. Do you mean because you have the fear, or you know who you are? Sorry, I was a bit confused.
Sorry, yeah. I added two questions in one there. So Jared, we'll take Jared's question first. So Jared, what Jared was asking
Yeah,
was, have you ever had to work with somebody who was wanting to create fear for a character, or like, are you more looking at working with personal sort of
right.
blockages, or yeah?
That's a great question, Jared. Not really. I haven't been working with people for character preparation. It's more for people who it is more their personal life and dealing with, like as I said to you, I had this wonderful client, and I'm very excited about this because after our session, I just have to share this story. She got an audition, so she did a self-tape challenge, and she got an audition with a casting director who'd only ever called her in before for like small roles or one-liners or something. And then after our session, she did this challenge, and this casting director saw her work and then contacted her for a bigger role for a new series. And she'd never like, and I said, that's amazing. I said, you did that. I said, because she felt like she was playing small and she didn't know why. And then we found out why she'd been playing small and why she'd been conditioned to play small. And so she wanted to play big and really put herself out there and feel excited and feel worthy anytime she got an audition. So I was so excited when she did that. So that was more the personal things, like why was she holding herself back from, you know, going after what she knows that she wants? And once we got to the root causes of that, she understood more clearly, and we interrupted those belief patterns, and we realized that that was redundant, that was no longer relevant to hold on to anymore, because she knows who she is and what she's going for. So once we cleared that away, so that was very exciting. And I said,
Mm,
you did that
yeah.
because you did the work, the internal work to you know, and listening. So we get our clients to listen to that recording, a hypnosis recording for 3 weeks, and she even said to me, oh, I want to keep listening to my recording. I said, well, it's yours, so keep going with it. But you know, because you're rewiring your brain. The science has sort of changed a bit on this. There's sort of conflicting thoughts about this, but typically they say to form a new habit usually takes about between 10 and 21 days to kind of
Mm,
lock that habit in and have it. It's like if you were going to the gym, you know, and it's hard at first, but then, you know, eventually it's, you know, it's your go-to habit. It's like with meditation. For me, that was very foreign, but then when I stuck at it, now it's my go-to. If I'm like, I'm a bit grumpy today, why is that? Oh, I haven't done my meditation, I better go do it. It's like
mm,
brushing my teeth. So you
yeah.
can wire in any habit, for better or for worse. So we want to go for better. In
Yeah.
answer to the other part of that question about the role, what's very interesting, since I've done this work, my own work, training in hypnosis, prior to actually doing my training, I was taking a Meisner class back in Australia, with a lovely company called Impulse Company. Hello to everybody there, I miss you. Which was originally founded by a gentleman by the name of Scott Williams, who's in London. So he does Impulse Company there. It got brought to Australia, yada, yada, yada. So I trained with them for quite a while, and Meisner was quite a revelation to me, and it was taught in such a loving way that I knew that yes, this works for me, because method acting had never really worked for me. And I think because you know, it's hard to say, and I certainly wouldn't want to, you know, I've learned a whole range of different techniques, but for some reason method didn't really do it for me. And I felt like I used to have this idea that if I hold on to my pain and the demons of my past, that's going to make me a better actor. So that's why I was holding on to things that were unhealthy, because I didn't trust that I could be a good enough actor with the technique that I had. So I was holding on to these personal experiences, which can be, you know, those memories can be useful, and it does work for a lot of people. But I was in a lot of personal pain and I wasn't dealing with it. And I wasn't being a good actor actually by holding on to that personal pain, because I was going in and messing up my auditions. But on the other side of that, in conjunction with that company, there is a teacher in New York, and the way that she approaches acting is kind of, I think it marries quite well with Meisner. She is a lovely lady by the name of Nikki Flax, and I actually interviewed Nikki, so that's going to go up on YouTube as well. And Nikki approaches acting from a psychotherapist's kind of perspective, because she trained in psychotherapy. She does make the distinction that acting it should not be treated as therapy, and she says this in our interview. She's very adamant that they're not the same thing. So what's fascinating about Nikki's work is that Nikki talks about, again, she goes into the brain like we talked about, and fight or flight, and there's no way that when you're in, when you're in a fight or flight situation, it might be harder to access, Hamlet, for example, to be or not to be, that speech, because it's not to say that you can't have nerves, but what she does is she's very much about learning your lines, like we were just talking about, when you are completely relaxed. So that kind of aligns with I was like, wow, this aligns with the work that I'm doing. And we talked about this actually, even though we sort of come at it from different points of view, but she's very much about learning your lines when you're stressed, studying for a test when you're stressed, like cramming and all that. Your brain actually doesn't really like it and doesn't really respond. So she is all about, that's one thing. So she's all about, when you're learning your lines, do something boring, cook your dinner, wash your dishes, because you are in a relaxed state, right? And those words, and learn them flat. And I always record my lines. I record my lines and I listen to them almost like a hypnosis recording. And I let them just go in, and I trust that they're going in. I read over my script. But she says, relax when you're learning those lines. Again, people have different methods of learning lines. And I really loved the other day, actually, when you were doing the monologue work with Jared, with the props. I thought that was another really cool way of approaching text. But also what she does is she talks about how emotions are in the body, and she doesn't believe in sort of doing this cannibalization of your personal life in order to get tears or to chase emotions. She's saying it lives in your body, and it's true. Her work is truly fascinating. And so she does you do kind of like this weird, it's so hard to explain without being in the room, but it's a tuning kind of thing, and it's about touching those points in the body. So you can actually access fear, and you can actually access sadness and all that through the programming that she does, and it doesn't relying on a memory. And so then you would do it with a monologue. So when you train with her, you're accessing, you're using your hands, you're doing all these sorts of things. There's a whole psychotherapy behind it. She's written an amazing book about it. And when I learned that, I was like, wow, this is mind-blowing. And combining that with a monologue, even if you're getting flustered, those words can just still come out because you've embedded them so deep in your subconscious. So I guess that was a long way of explaining that generally I work with people on their personal issues so that they can be better as performers. But there is I want to sort of look into more this sort of psychotherapy approach that she does, because I think it's quite fascinating. And there's an alignment there with sort of the work that I do. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. And I think that's something that we're hearing loud and clear, and a pattern throughout all this conversation today, Amy, is that it goes hand in hand, right? Like yourself and how you look after yourself and your awareness of yourself aids your acting, right? And in turn, your acting is aided by, like, it's this circle, right? They're very much synergy between the two things. And if you ignore one thing or the other thing, you're going to be in trouble, right? So equally, if you focus all on the holistic aspect and don't focus on acting technique itself, and it sounds like, there's real work as well that's starting to join these two things together, and quite possibly has been in the past as well. Yeah. And that's a really, really exciting prospect too, right? But it's something that we don't hear enough about. Like, people aren't talking about the other side of things. I think the sort of self-care, looking after yourself, like looking at yourself as a person and trying to have those things finely balanced, it's just not spoken about.
If I can quote you, Adam, from our interview, because I thought this was an excellent thing that you said. I'm going to read it. You said to me, how do you manage the aspects, the emotional aspects and the mental health aspects of this career? And you said you realized, or once you realized, it's better to be a person who's an actor than an actor who is occasionally, than a person, it's better to be who's an actor than an actor who's occasionally a person.
Yeah.
And I thought that was brilliant. And you were saying, when I filled in the other sort of hollow parts that you recognized that existed, it changed everything. And it's so true, because I know that from my own experience, is that when I dealt with the things that I knew were holding me back, it did change. And also I did a show last year where there was so much subtext, and so much, the play is so brilliantly written, it just made my job so easy as an actor, but it had so much backstory in it. And I also could come from it from my therapist brain, like trying to imagine what might have happened to bring this woman to being, I was playing a woman that was quite unhinged, but I didn't have to be unhinged to play this woman. And it was probably one of the best shows I've been in and the freest I've felt. And that's post doing my own work on
Wow.
me and realizing that actually I have the technique, I have the resources. We all understand the human condition. We can still feel these emotions without being so tied to, you know, these painful memories from our past that we kind of hold on to, and still give great performances. And so, yeah, it's interesting now that I look at characters in a very different frame of mind. And I even look at other characters and kind of wonder about them in terms of, if you have to play the villain, right? This work is great for that, because I kind of think, well, we could see that villain, but then, you don't see what might have happened in their past that brought them to be, and your imagination can go there. Like, what is the unresolved stuff going on for this person? I was thinking last night actually about like Draco Malfoy, for example, because I'm a Harry Potter fan, and like he just seems like a bratty, mean kid, right? He's a bully and he's really nasty and not likable. But as that series progresses and it's quite well written, you see that actually, like, maybe he's a lonely kid. Maybe he's felt left out. Maybe he's feeling, you know, and you can kind of start
Yeah.
to look at these characters with a greater sense of empathy. At least I certainly am, and I don't need to necessarily, live their experiences. And certainly this character I was playing last year, what she wanted out of life and how her childhood was very different from mine. I tried to look at the parallels, but I tried to understand the pain behind that. Like,
Hmm.
what is the pain behind all her action, what she's doing right now? So I think it's, yeah,
Yeah,
anyway, that's gone
absolutely.
on
Because
a tangent, but
nobody's born that way, right? You're not born into thinking
exactly.
or feeling a certain way, a set way. It's all learned from your environment, right? It's all sort of picked up from what you're exposed to in childhood and throughout. And I think that is a hugely, hugely impactful thing to take away from this, Amy, is that not only by facing your fears and anxieties and trying to work with it as an actor, is it going to improve your personal life and you as a person, but
Yeah.
it's also going to add layers and depth to how you're able to access characters, how free you can feel as a performer as well. So it's this multi-layered, multifaceted thing. And of course, as you say, it might be right for some people to go down the hypnosis route with this. It might be right for people to go down another angle, but it's about finding ways that work for you. But it's really, really, a prevalent thing to try and get a handle and an awareness on these things, and not just to let them fester and sort of burrow in a year after year after year. And yeah.
Exactly, because you could be a brilliant performer, but you might have, and I think of like the wonderful Philip Seymour Hoffman. Like, it's so sad that
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any of that man's work anymore. The
Mm-hmm.
Amy Winehouses of the world, who are truly brilliant and truly talented, like
Mm-hmm.
undeniably, but their
Mm-hmm.
personal lives, unfortunately, where there's substance abuse involved to try and deal with whatever pain that exists there, or the stresses of fame, or whatever it might be. And so I'm very concerned with that, and again, just to go back to Nikki, who I was referring to before, she's like, actors deserve to have wonderful lives. We deserve to be happy. We don't deserve to be mistreated, and we don't deserve to kind of tear ourselves apart, for these careers. And that's what I was doing essentially, and getting nowhere fast, getting more and more resentful, not putting myself out there, not networking, not doing the parts of our business or our career that I needed to do, because I thought, well, my talent alone should be enough, but sometimes it's not. And sometimes you have to push yourself out there and network with people, and you have to deal with that rejection. And so part of my motto with this business is rebel against rejection. And what I mean by that is, yeah, accept, okay, I'm not getting this job, but how can I turn that around? How can I always turn everything around? And sometimes that feels, and again, in like this COVID-19 situation, for some people, they may be feeling like, how can I turn this around? Like, I feel helpless, I feel hopeless, but it can be really small things. It can be really, really tiny things, and it's a habit and it's repetition. And that's why, you know, listening to a recording, that's repetition, because at first you may not buy into the fact that you are enough, and you may need to be reminded a lot that you are enough. And again, Sam Neill also talks about, sort of similar to what you were saying about you know, you don't want to be an actor who's occasionally a person. Sam Neill, who some of you might know from Jurassic Park, we've kind of claimed him. He's technically, he's lived in Australia for a long time, and we basically claimed him as ours, but sort of technically not. But I was watching him on an interview recently, and he said that he doesn't say, he says his job is acting, but he often doesn't say that he is an actor. He says his job is acting, because if he says I'm an actor, but there's no work, then I'm also saying I'm nothing. Like, if I'm an actor and I'm not acting, then I've wrapped all my self-worth up in this role that I've given myself. And he said, but I'm so much more than that. He owns a vineyard. He does all these other things. And so I guess the message I could give to people out there is that, okay, maybe at the moment there aren't auditions flowing in. There's a lot of uncertainty. When's West End going to open up, or Broadway, or Hollywood, or whatever? Or, you know, my mates are getting self-tapes, but I'm not. And, you know, and we've got all this time to think. And that's the problem, is that we've got all this time to be like, to allow these thoughts to creep in. But it's just this moment that's out of your control. But what is in your control is, you know, networking with someone, writing something, working on a monologue. Some days you're not going to want to feel like it, but, you know, do something small. You know, practice gratitude. This is going to pass. This will pass. And I know we can't see an end point at this point. It's going, you know, every day the landscape of it is changing. But there's been difficult times in the world before, and we made it through, and we always will. And just be kind to yourself. You know, the self-care is so important. Don't beat yourself up. You know, there will be a place for you. There will be a place for you, and you can't, you know, you can't keep looking at what other people are doing, and you've got to define what it is for yourself that you want. So.
Wow, Amy, thank you so much. Guys, if you missed the start of this conversation, go back, take notes. There's tons and tons to unpack from this. Amy, just thank you so much for sharing so much with us today, and being so generous with your thoughts and amazing stuff. Where can people find you, Amy, just before the Instagram robots chuck us out of this conversation? Where can people find you online if they're not following you already?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on this handle that you can see here at Hypno with AC. Drop me a message if you have any questions. You can email me at hypnotherapywithamy@gmail.com. If you want to look at my actor page, there's not a massive amount on there at the moment, because I've taken a step sideways more into this work, which I'm absolutely thrilled about. It's ITS_Amy Coutts is also my actor page. So yes. And also too, I'm just going to give a little plug to my YouTube series. Not so much because of me, but I really want people to see some of the people I've spoken to. I've had some wonderful guests, including Mr. Adam Coutts right here, who, by the way, is not my cousin. He's not my brother. We just happen to.
No relate people. No.
But yeah, I'll give people information if they want to see the series, because I've learned so much from every wonderful person I've spoken to in the industry. So yeah, check that out as well.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And we've beaten the Instagram robots by like 30 seconds, so well done. They will pick us out soon, so they're going to come for us. Amy, thank you so much once again. Thank you everybody that's joined in and asked questions, comments. Please give Amy a follow. And yeah, keep that community going, guys. Jared's sending love and hugs to all. We send those love and hugs to everybody as well. Love and hugs, everyone. Love and hugs. Have a wonderful Friday, and we'll see you another time. Thanks, Amy. Thanks so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Bye.
Bye-bye. Smooth exit here. Here we go.